Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Susan Kaufman. I'm here for Attitude Magazine and Attitude's ADHD Experts webinar series. It is snowing frantically in New York City, and I hope most of you are somewhere where spring is actually appearing, which is not the case for us. So welcome to all of you today for joining us, and welcome Sharon Saline, who's our expert speaker today on a topic of huge interest, which is how to motivate teens without threats or arguments. As some of you may know, at Attitude, we recently launched a new program called Dear Teen Parenting Coach. It's on both the Attitude website and in the magazine as a column. And as part of that program, we invited our readers to submit questions on teen parenting via an online form. So these questions are the ones that we present to our expert panel of teen experts who answer, and those answers are then posted in both on the website and also appear in the column and print. So the response has been tremendous. And as we looked at those questions, it became really clear pretty quickly that motivating teens was a huge concern for many of you, whether it's homework or sleep or screen time. You reported basically feeling exasperated and exhausted trying to teach responsibility, motivation, and follow through to your teens. So Sharon Saline, who's been a wonderful expert responder in this column for us, is going to talk to us today about a collaborative approach to motivating teens, increasing their buy-in and increasing their personal accountability and fostering independence. So she'll be talking about how you as parents can teach goal-directed, persistent time management and organizational skills that might actually stick. You'll find Sharon's responses on attitudemag.com now. And Sharon, we're so grateful to you for making the time for Attitude as you've done so well in the last few months.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. So let me tell you just a bit about Sharon, her background. She is a clinical psychologist. She's the author of a book called What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, How to Work Together to Empower Kids for Success in School and in Life. She specializes in working with children, teens, and families living with ADHD, with learning disabilities, or other mental health issues. And she brings a unique perspective as both a sibling in an ADHD home and also her decades of experience as a clinical psychologist, guiding families toward effective communication. She is a magna cum laude graduate of Brown University, and she has both master's and doctorate degrees in psychology. You can visit her website, drsharonsaline.com. That's drsharonsaline.com for more information. Before she starts her presentation, we wanted to start with a poll and to ask all of you to tell us which aspect of your child's life you're most concerned about. So let's see if that poll is up. Yes. So please tell us. And also, if you can, post your child's age in the chat box in your control panel, so we have a sense of your interest, and Sharon has a sense of your interest and your time, the topic that you're most concerned in. While you're answering, let me just tell you a bit about how these webinars work in case you haven't been here before. You will be posting your questions in the chat box anytime, and after Sharon will present her slide presentation, and then she'll answer as many questions as we have time for. If you have problems hearing us, it's definitely you're going to be because of your internet bandwidth, and you should dial in with your phone line. You'll find that phone number in the audio box, tick off phone call in your control panel, and that number will come up. After the webinar, this webinar will be on our website in a live replay format, including the slides. Sometimes people want to share it with a spouse or a family member or a professional. It'll be on the Attitude website later this afternoon, attitudemag.com/webinars. And if you want to download the slides right now, so you have them in front of you while Sharon's speaking, you should go to the handout section of the control panel, take that little arrow, and you'll see a link that will allow you to print out the slides. So Janice, if you could let us see the responses to the polls. The poll, interesting, very interesting. So it looks like the number one problem for people is battling screen time with responsibilities, and that's a perennial, isn't it? Also finishing homework, getting ahead of homework, and then getting enough sleep. We hear about sleep a lot and kids staying up late at night. And then finally, other. So if you have another concern, please post that in the chat box as well. So with that, let me turn it over to Sharon again with our thanks and let her start her presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that lovely introduction, and I'm so excited to be here today. Procrastinating, rushing to get things done, and being distracted. Do these sound familiar? Like so many teens who I interviewed for my forthcoming book, What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, working together to empower kids for success in school and life, Dominic and Ashley share their challenges with motivation that prevent them from acting like the capable, independent people they hope to become. Dominic says he's the best procrastinator ever. He can only work under pressure because it puts the heat under him to do it. Ashley does everything quickly so she can have more time with her friends. Today we're going to talk about how you can assist teens in starting things, sticking with tasks, and finishing them even when the going gets tough. When you offer choices and negotiate collaborative solutions, your frustration level goes down and their sense of competency increases. It's a win-win scenario for everyone. Okay. I am not able to switch the slide. Could you just, there you go. Thank you. I think I'll just say slide if that's okay. So let's talk about my perspective. So my perspective is that kids with ADHD want to do well if they can, because doing well is always preferable to not doing well. What happens, though, is that they often lack the self-discipline to put in the efforts that they need in order to make things different. When kids with ADHD expect failure from themselves, they've given up on themselves, and partially the reason for that is that they've received messages that adults have given up on them or been unable to help or understand them. Historically, adults ask, what's wrong with this child? Why are you blah, blah, blah? Instead, I'm going to propose that you ask a different question. And the question that I think needs to be the first question that you ask is, what's happened so that you can't do X, Y, or Z? Then we can kind of look at what changes in the environment would help motivate a teen to do something differently and also change the conversation they have inside about themselves. We want to help adults build compassion for teenagers because it's very frustrating to raise teens in general, and teens with ADHD can be particularly difficult because they push back extra hard at being told what to do because they spend hours listening now or over the course of their lifetime to what they haven't done that's right. One of the ways that you can build compassion for your teen is by asking questions and listening, really listening to what they're saying, or sometimes not asking questions, but listening to what their body's showing you, what their tone of voice is showing you, what their face is showing you. The other way to build compassion is to remember what it takes for them to get through each day. It takes courage to wake up and go to school for many kids with ADHD because school is not the place where they feel most at home. School is not a place where they feel successful. If kids with ADHD do feel relatively successful at school, it still takes courage because it's a relative success. It's not complete. There are still challenges for them. Sometimes it helps adults to think about what challenges we had as teens, what mattered to us, and who helped us get through, what helped us get through. Not because we're going to decide that what helped us will be right for our children, but just to kind of nurture the compassion that, boy, adolescence can really be tough. Slide. Sometimes teens with ADHD welcome help from adults, but often they're ambivalent about it or downright rejecting of well-intentioned advice. They've had many years of teachers, parents, and other adults correcting and redirecting them. By the time adolescence arrives, when natural urges for independence and separation from parental authority naturally kick in, they frequently want to do everything themselves. I have one client who told his mother, "Mom, you are on an as-needed-to-know basis. If I think you need to know, I'll tell you." But the problem is that kids still rely on adults for safety, security, and well-being. Why is it that some kids with ADHD don't ask for help or reject it? I asked numerous kids who I interviewed for my book this question, and the same answer came up over and over. It was shame. Rowan, age 15, recalls her shame as early as 5th grade. "I was embarrassed that I had a disability. I think I denied it, but I definitely knew that I was ADD. I contested for a long time because I didn't want to be seen as someone that needed that extra help." Some kids tell me that they don't like feeling vulnerable. I had a boy in my practice this week saying, "I don't want to ask for help because I want to be able to do it all myself. I don't want to have to depend on anyone. I don't like people seeing me as weak." You may not see this shame or this defense against weakness. What you may see is anger or tears or yelling about something that's completely unrelated. Slide. So let's talk for a minute about the psychological factors of adolescence that are so fundamental to topics like motivation. So in adolescence, a teen moves into the scientific method of thinking. They can create a hypothesis about an actual or a potential event and test this against reality. Teens are interested in the process of problem solving, not just the solution. They can be self-centered, sure, and self-focused, but they're moving away from family bonds into the society at large. And in doing so, they create distance through criticism of parents and adults. However, as I said earlier, they are still dependent on adults for a number of things. And that dance is complicated for them, but especially for you. Your teen is involved in this struggle to create themselves as separate from you and still connected. You're involved in a dance to try to figure out how to be connected and to guide them into what you think will be successful adulthood without stepping on that need for autonomy. It's hard to know when to let the chips fall as they may. Luis, age 17, told me, "I'd be like, yeah, I don't need their help. I can deal with this on my own. I'd say, yeah, I'm proud. I get a little cocky. But sometimes, you need to get help from other people, even though you're independent. You can't always just storm through life alone at times." Slide. When people are triggered and upset, nothing good or productive happens. Parents have to regulate themselves first before dealing with their kids. In my book, I outline 5 C's of ADHD parenting, and the very first one is self-control. When you can separate your feelings about your teen's behavior from what's actually happening in the moment, you're able to think clearly and act appropriately. You may need to do some breathing techniques. You may need to take a walk around the block. One of my personal favorites is to go to the bathroom. I'll say, "Oh, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom." And then I'll go in. I'll wash my hands. I'll fix my hair. Maybe I'll sit down and read some comic that I have because I keep Calvin and Hobbes in my bathroom. I will take what I call a time apart, and then I will re-engage. And I will let them know that I'm going to go to the bathroom, and they'll see me when I come out, which hopefully won't be 4 hours from then. Kids repeatedly tell me in my clinical practice and in the interviews I conducted for my book that they want their parents to fight less with them, listen to them, and have more patience. So instead of losing your cool, what I think your kids are asking for you to do is to think and act like your GPS. You know, when you go off the direction that your GPS is taking you, what does it say? Recalculating, redirecting, rerouting, very neutrally, very calmly. And the GPS sees those bumps, sees those detours as an opportunity to regroup and send you back on the path. That's what we hope to do with motivating teens. Now, parents often talk to me about defiance and how they'll tell their kids to do things and try to work with them, and their kids just won't comply. My personal belief is that defiance is a relationship problem. Power struggles are ways to avoid disappointment, yours and theirs. And so we want to try to figure out what is an acceptable goal that everybody agrees on that can actually be achieved so that the defiance doesn't need to step in as a defense against the disappointment. That instead, there's motivation to do the thing that actually I feel capable of doing. Slide. When you have regulated yourself, you are then ready to collaborate with them because you can listen to their point of view and ideas. You can think about your bottom line and you can ask them about theirs. A 9th grade boy came into my office last week with poor grades from the 3rd marking period. I said to him, "How did you feel?" He made a face. Blech. Meanwhile, his parents were sitting in the room. Mom was biting her tongue and Dad was sucking in his cheeks. He said, "They're really mad at me." I said, "I know, and they'll probably tell us later. How do you feel?" And he said, "Well, I don't want to have a C in history. I think I might be able to get a B, but I'm not turning my homework in, so I can't get a B." I said, "Are you willing to talk about that and try to do something different?" Yes. Now, by talking to him first and letting the parents cool down, we were able to establish an area that mattered to him. And this is how we're going to approach today motivating your teens. Asking how he sees what he's doing and what he thinks he's capable of. Slide. Motivation is inherently linked to several executive functioning skills. Now, we know that executive functioning skills are the directive capacities of the brain located in the frontal lobes, and they unfold developmentally as people mature and also as people use them, but they don't unfold in a linear fashion. In kids with ADHD, this process happens more slowly than it does for their peers because there can be a lag of up to 3 years in brain maturity. Often what occurs to kids without ADHD to do without thinking, that's second nature, can be much harder for your teen with ADHD. Motivation, why you do something, is composed of these 4 elements. Initiation, getting started on something, often without direction and excessive reminding. Time management, doing things on time and meeting deadlines, correctly estimating how long something will take, and avoiding procrastination. Sustained attention, managing your attention so that you can resist distractions when faced with a task. Goal-oriented persistence, setting a goal, staying focused on it, and returning to the goal after an interruption. Let's see if I can do the slide. Okay. When a task fundamentally is unrewarding or uninteresting, the way that kids might see doing homework, or perhaps you might see cleaning out the litter box or taking the trash to the dump, no one feels excited to do it. With the lower amounts of dopamine in their ADHD brains, it takes your teens longer than their non-ADHD peers to get moving. Despite their physical appearance, your 15-year-old son might actually be more like a 12-year-old in these areas. It's really helpful to remember this developmental difference in terms of setting your expectations and planning your interventions. It's normal for kids to have strengths in some areas, such as being a good artist or a lacrosse player, and challenges in others, like managing time or prioritizing homework over Snapchat. Finding your own reason to do something and deriving internal satisfaction from doing it doesn't consistently emerge until late adolescence. There are two types of motivation that you've probably heard about. The first is extrinsic motivation. It refers to an outside request, reward, or responsibility that depends on accomplishing a goal. You turn in your permission form for driver's ed by Tuesday, or you can't take the class. For us adults, we put the dishes in the dishwasher before we cook because we like to have a clean kitchen when we get started. Or perhaps we take the garbage out before we do the litter box. Perhaps we do the litter box before we do television. So we want to watch TV. We take the garbage out, we do the litter box, and then we can reward ourselves with our TV show. That is extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation means striving towards a goal for personal satisfaction or accomplishment. You want to break your own record on a favorite game. You want to run faster than your last time. You're motivated internally to do something. When a teen with ADHD doesn't see any immediate satisfaction from a task or grasp any long-term benefit, especially for in the moment, because teens have what I call now and not now brains. That means later isn't even on the horizon. If I don't have to take the litter box out to clean it now, I won't. What's the problem? Later it'll be smelly? No worries. I'll deal with it later. Versus adults who will say, oh, you know what? I know I need to clean the litter box before it gets smelly. I'm going to do it now, and then I'll watch my show on TV. So because of their now, not now brains, for teens, if there's no immediate satisfaction or direct immediate result, their tendency is to put it off. They usually need an external reward to encourage them until the satisfaction of doing it. That doesn't come until later adolescence, or because of practice and seeing that there is satisfaction kicks in. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a family where the rule was because I said so, and if not, the threat was punishment. So I lived by the rule of fear. Now, much of the research today shows that punishment really doesn't work. Sometimes it's necessary. Your child takes out your car without your permission and gets a fender bender. I guess they won't be driving your car for a while. That's a really natural and logical consequence. But because I said so, you can't drive my car. Well, why not? Because I said so. Without, an explanation, without something that makes sense, isn't really going to work for this really fact-based, information-driven generation. Intimidation and parenting by fear can get things done, but it doesn't build any lasting skills. And part of the goal of raising kids with or without ADHD is to teach them skills so that they can live happily and, functionally as adults. So what are incentives that work? So here's the difference between an incentive and a bribe, because lots of parents I work with say, well, why should I reward them for something they should do anyway? Like, why should I reward them for cleaning up their room when they need to clean up their room anyway? So an incentive is not a bribe. A bribe is like, here, kid, here's $5. Take this bag across the street. Or here's $5, clean up your room. You get the action after you receive the reward, and then you have to do the action. There's no motivation to actually do the action because you've already received the reward. For incentives that work, and incentives that are not bribes, are incentives that say, clean up your room, and then you can watch television. Clean up your room, and then we'll go out for ice cream. Clean up your room, and then I'll take you to Old Navy to get some new shirts. You link the undesirable activity with something that you've worked with them on that you know they want. Effective incentives need to change periodically to keep them appealing. Often incentives fail because parents don't collaborate with their kids about them. The kids have to be involved in choosing what the incentives are to get their buy-in. So let's talk about how you can choose incentives that are meaningful and matter. Think about for a second what your son or daughter loves to do. No activity is too unimportant to consider. Whether it's additional time playing outside, using electronics or social media, or going out for a special ice cream, these are all privileges. I think today that kids basically believe that electronics are their privilege. Electronics are their right, not their privilege. And, my belief is that kids are entitled to several things: love, food, shelter, clothing, education, safety. But they're not entitled to electronics. Electronics are a bonus. And that's how they need to be set up in your house. When you have made a list of what you think your child loves to do, sit down with them and make a list with them. What do you like to do? What are things you want? I have one kid in my practice now who wants to build his own computer. So he wants to work towards earning points that will be for dollars to buy parts for his computer. And we've come up with a plan about how you're going to do that. So that's a long-term plan, and then there's a short-term plan. And what I mean by that is each week, each day, he has some tasks he has to do. And at the end of that day, he can earn some bonus screen time. He also, if he completes all the tasks, he earns 2 points. And those points get added up at the end of the week, and they go into, basically the digital jar of points that are linked to dollars for his computer parts. In this way, we've actually increased his cooperation. So you want to use technology or phone or shopping or whatever it is that matters to your kid. Now, one thing I want you to think about is that you are also an incentive for your kids. I know you think, ugh, my teenager doesn't want to spend any time with me. That's probably true 80 to 90% of the time. But the 20% that it's not, the 20% that your kid wants you to take them shopping or wants to go to the grocery store to pick out foods they like or might want to go see, Black Panther with you, those are things that you need to build on, because those are things that show you that your kid actually does enjoy being with you. So what I say to parents is have 2 kinds of incentives. One incentive is if you clean your room when you're supposed to, then we can go see Black Panther. If you don't clean your room when you're supposed to, then I'll sit in here with you and we'll clean your room together. Either way, they're spending time with you. Frankly, put some tunes on and try to have fun if the second option is what occurs. The next thing I want you to think about in terms of incentives is what type and size of homework assignments or chores do they manage successfully? You've likely noticed how much and what your child can do easily and what's harder. Breaking things down helps them accomplish something. Since no step is too small, reflect on the quantity of work that they can manage. Another way that programs for motivation fail is that the steps to get started are still too big. You think small, and if they still can't start, think even smaller. The third issue is how long can your son or daughter focus on homework or household tasks before getting distracted or bored? For kids with ADHD between the ages of 11 and 14, it's usually 20 to 45 minutes. And for teens between the ages of 14 to 18, it's likely anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Sometimes with hyperfocusing, if it's a task they really like, these can be longer. And of course, times vary with individual kids. But the goal is that you set the work period, you have a break that's timed, and you go back to the work period. Then that break is the incentive. The break is something they like to do, and then they can go back to the task at hand. Now, when in the midst of doing an activity, your child is not cooperating, that is not the time to renegotiate the plan. We will discuss how to deal with that later. But essentially, what I'll say now is if you've made a plan and your child is not doing that, and there are consequences that you've set up with your child for not doing that, then you have to follow the consequences. And that's another one of those C's I've talked about from my book, which is consistency. If you say you're going to do something, then you need to do it. So don't commit to any sort of consequence that you actually can't follow through on. How do we prevent procrastination? Trouble getting started is really kind of the biggest thing in terms of motivation. You know, something that can seem really small to us, an adult, like doing a spelling worksheet, like vocabulary. I know in high school teens often have to do vocabulary sheets for English, can feel enormous sometimes to a student with ADHD. They often think, why start it if it feels impossible to finish? Why even bother? If I don't try, I can't fail. They're masters of avoidance. So the best solution to feeling overwhelmed by a project and procrastinating it is to break it down into smaller pieces, which I've said before. So what I mean by that is you have to say, okay, I have 50 spelling words that I need to do by Thursday, and today it's Wednesday and I haven't started. So how am I going to do this? Sit down, let's figure out. How many can you do before you want to throw your spelling book against the wall? 5. Cool. All right. So let's do 5. Take a 3-minute break and let's do 5 more. And I'll set the timer for the break and you can do whatever you want. And then when it goes off, you'll do 5 more. When you've completed an hour, you can have a slightly longer break. And that's how you help them get through. You work with them on that. Lists are also really helpful in terms of avoiding procrastination because kids with ADHD have trouble planning and prioritizing which to do when. One of the things that I think is really important when you're talking about procrastination with teens is sitting down with them, particularly around homework, and asking them, do they want to do the hardest thing first, then the medium, then the easiest when their brain is most tired? And perhaps their medication is completely gone? Or do they like to start with the easy thing and feel a really quick sense of success and then move on to the harder thing and then leave the medium thing last? And whether that's, helping you with home chores or doing their homework, having a sense of how to approach something is really part of a way to get started. So initiation has to do with the size of the task, but also the level of difficulty of the task. When you take breaks, and breaks are really essential for kids with ADHD, it helps reduce how daunting a task can be because they know that they're not going to be doing this task for the next 3 hours. They only have to do it for X number of minutes. Try to make the tasks fun. If particularly around household chores, if you're going to do the dishes together, put some music on. Particularly their music. Try to listen to it. Find one song that maybe you can tolerate. Maybe do a dancing dishes escapade. But try to do something fun. Maybe tell jokes. Maybe time yourselves. How fast can we pick up your room? So if you can do that, then you're working together towards a mutual goal. Now, we also want to talk about teaching time management, and I'm going to, be quickly wrapping things up here. But I feel like this is, an essential element of motivation. So kids with ADHD have an internal challenge with understanding and effectively using time. And that's because of their now, not now brains. They may not actually grasp how 5, 10, 20 minutes feels. And often they tend to underestimate how long things take and wait until the last moment, as we heard from Dominic in the beginning, when they have that fire underneath them, or sometimes they overestimate how long something will take and become too daunted to start it. To teach time estimation skills, what you have to do is teach backwards design. So backwards design means planning in reverse to get to where you want to be in the future. You work backwards and assign increments of time to the various steps along the way. Okay, I need to leave for work by 7:45. This is how we think about it in adult land. And before that, I have to feed the cat, which takes about 5 minutes, make and eat breakfast, which takes about 20 minutes, get dressed and brush my teeth. That's another 25 minutes. So that's a total of 50 minutes. Okay, so that means I have 10 extra minutes if I wake up at 6:45. Is that enough time for me to deal with unpredictable things, returning phone calls, or checking my email? Now, for your kids, you have to do a much, much smaller, watered down version of backwards design. If you have to be at school by 7:30, what time do you need to leave the house? 7:15. Okay. And what time do you need to wake up to be downstairs for breakfast by 7 o'clock, 6:45? Okay, that's what time you're going to get out of bed. What time do you need your alarm to be set to get out of bed? So do you see how I'm really breaking things down into very small and simple steps? And I'm working with a teen to figure that out. The other way that you can teach time estimation skills with homework in particular is by pointing out when something starts and when it's finished. So how long something actually takes. So they can learn to see how long things actually take them. And that includes for your backwards design. And you can write down the start times and end times initially to kind of show them. Remember how teens like to hypothesize and test out a theory. This is a great way to apply that interest. Use technology to help you with time management. Kids love their phones and they love setting alarms on their phones to alert them about time. And this can be really helpful for you. Now, I'm a firm believer in routines, and I think routines build habits, and habits means you don't have to think about things, but they take time. And they take time because kids with ADHD may struggle with information transferring from working memory to short-term memory to long-term memory, and they also may process information more slowly. So if a task seems boring or overwhelming or unachievable, a discouragement will set in, and kids will likely lack motivation. Often they won't apply themselves to boring tasks now because they don't really care about next week because the now is so intolerable. And there goes any kind of persistence. Teens with ADHD ultimately have to figure out for themselves what keeps them going. And your job is to help them figure out what that is, not tell them what you think would work better for them, because then there's no buy-in. We have to have buy-in. I had teens tell me this, in fact, Daryl, age 15, said, I just tell myself, hopefully this works. If not, I'm going to have to find a new way. I'm like, okay, it didn't work. I'll have to try harder next time. And maybe I'll ask my mom what she thinks I could do, and then I'll move on. So one of the things you can do as a parent is to notice their efforts. Notice how they're trying to do something to finish it, even if they don't finish it, because that kind of praise helps encourage them along. And they don't have that voice necessarily inside of them that's telling them to do that. So hearing your external voice, nurturing them along in positive comments will assist them. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson in her book Positivity says the positivity ratio needs to be 3-to-1. Are you giving your kids 3-to-1? I'm going to tell you, as a parent of 2 older teenagers, my answer was not yes, as much as I would have liked. Let's see. So to create successful motivation plans, you're going to work together on creating goals and plans. Your teen has to be invested in whatever you're creating, so make sure that they are. Challenges that are frequently frustrating, overwhelming, or isolating become manageable when you face them together. And you can't face anything together when both of you are dysregulated. So you're going to have to figure out a way, first and foremost, to deal and predict the eruptions. Try to aim to change one thing at a time. Think about yourself and your relationship with your partner. They may want you to change 3 or 4 things about yourself. How many can you change? 1. We can change one thing. Start with one thing with your kid that you can both agree on is an important thing. Have there be progress and success in that one thing for as little as a month or as much as a month. Then you can possibly add in another thing, but have success with that one thing. Lay out specific steps, behaviors, and rewards for whatever you come up with, and write everything down and post it in the kitchen. There's really no other way to teach going through the steps of doing something without lists. Remember that learning EF skills take time, more time and effort than you probably have expected. Keep at it. Things will sink in and your teen will become the functional, responsible adult you want to see. Here's one thing I really want you to try to remember. Defeats are not failures, but they are critical pieces of information. Remember your GPS. Think recalculating. Years of negative feedback make ADHD teens extra sensitive to not doing well. They expect defeat. Help them expect success and defeat, because defeats will happen. This is part of living and learning. Collaborate. Break things down. Teach backward design. Keep things interesting. Praise efforts and the outcome. Expect to regroup. And use the fun factor. Try to maintain a sense of humor. Oh, here we go again. Look, it's the I haven't taken out the trash all week time. When you can keep things light, they can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That was fascinating. And we have so many great questions. Listeners, could you please post the very specific challenge that you're facing? Because we'll try to tee up some of these for Sharon to address. Here's one of them. I think this question in many forms has come from other people. And it's basically this. This person says, my daughter's 15. She does most of her homework on the computer and gets distracted every 15 minutes and starts to browse the web. I want to help her, but she becomes hostile when I ask to help. She feels demeaned by this. And I think she feels she needs to prove that she can work on her own. I'm at a loss. What can I do to persuade her to accept my help? That comment, my teen won't let me help, won't let me engage with him, is coming from a number of the listeners, Sharon, who are listening to your suggestions for working together, and yet feeling that they can't crack the hostility of their teen when it comes to that relationship. So
this is a very, very common challenge. So, as I said, I'm all about collaboration, but ultimately you as a parent have the final say. You actually, your frontal lobes are fully formed and you know how things play out over time, much more than they do. And so, if you're attempting to help or set limits in ways that your children feel like they don't need, you are going to get pushback. Expect it. But the bottom line is you get to determine in some ways what you know is right. And what I'm hearing, in particular for this parent, is that what she knows is right is that it's taking her daughter 2 or 3 times longer to do her homework because she can't stay on the screen that the homework's on. So to me, what I would do is sit down and have a conversation. Look, you and I both agree that your homework is taking too long. You are having a hard time staying on the homework that's on the screen of your computer. So I think we should regroup and make a different plan, because I want to see you turn your homework in because I know you're capable of it, and you want to see yourself turn your homework in and not spend 3 hours doing an hour and a half of homework. Here's what I'm going to suggest. Bring your computer out into a common space. I think that for a lot of teenagers with ADHD, their computers live in their room, and that's a big problem because you as a parent cannot see what they're doing, and you need to see what they're doing. Um, the other thing is that I would have all tabs closed down except for the homework and leave the phone um, out and create blocks of study time that are timed. So, for example, a 15-year-old can probably do 15 minutes of homework. No, let me say that. Can probably do anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes of homework in one shot, and then can have maybe 10 minutes to do all the apps she wants on her phone, and then again sit down and do another chunk of homework and then get the phone. Now, your teen will rebel against this because that's not how it's been, but you get to decide as a parent about how it is now. And one of the things that I like to say to parents is, look, now that you're in high school, or now that you're starting your final quarter in high school and this hasn't gotten better, we need to do something different. So we're going to do this and we're going to try it this way. And here's the area where you get to have a say and you get to have buy-in, but I'm setting the stage of what the main topic is. And the other thing is that it's hard when your kids aren't happy with you, and that is their job. You know, I have a metaphor that I use, and when deer or elk come of age, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but their antlers are covered with velvet, and they go up to trees and they rub against the tree, and then their velvet kind of hangs down, and they look like really scraggly, kind of the equivalent of pimply teenagers. And then they go up and they rub against the tree, and the tree is just standing there, solid in its sense of purpose, rooted, knows what its job is. We're the tree. Your child will rub up against you. Don't take it personally.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm going to switch to sleep. I'm going to just give you two questions that are very similar, and they have been repeated by many other people. So, our high school sophomore goes to bed, does his homework between 10:30 and 3 a.m. We gave him an ultimatum. He can't learn to drive or practice driving until he starts going to sleep at 11 or 12. It's been a few days and he's still procrastinating. What do you recommend? Another person. My daughter stays up way too late on a regular basis. I observe her staying up past midnight, and then she struggles to sleep and starts the week with 4 hours sleep. This continues during the week. She's so tired that she struggles to get her work done. What can I do to get her to get enough sleep? So that's a quandary. Sometimes connected to screen time and sometimes not.
Right. So there are three different ways we can go with this answer. So I'm going to try to tackle each one. Number one, one of the problems that we see in teenagers is that their biological time clock runs later than often the school day accounts for. So really teens actually can stay up until about midnight and work, and then they would probably be ready for school by 9 or 10.
Right.
But that's not how the system goes. So I think the first thing is sort of acknowledging that that is a challenge, and they can sleep all they want on the week. Trying to make up sleep on the weekends is often, a good way to go. But as their parent, you are still responsible for their safety and health and well-being in those areas. And so I think that the person who basically said the incentive is he can't driver's ed, this, that, and the other, and he hasn't changed, that's a great incentive. My question is, are his friends doing that so he's seeing that he's behind? I've actually noticed that a lot of kids with ADHD aren't super eager to learn to drive because they're afraid of their own distractibility behind the wheel. So in that case, I think with this child, I might encourage the parents to help him get started on homework earlier and maybe have a family work time that starts at 8 and goes to 10. And that he's up till 12, and you can actually have your internet shut off through your internet company at midnight. And I've had some families do that where their kids are up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then it comes back on at 6 o'clock. So that might be a solution to this problem. And in a short term, in that case, if your child is cooperating and the internet's shut off and the homework is being finished by midnight, then perhaps there is, a shorter, more immediate incentive that your child might be interested in. The third answer is for kids who basically are going to bed too late and can't get up in the morning. Because of the norepinephrine effect on ADHD, sometimes the alertness cycle is off, and kids with ADHD have a lot of trouble getting up in the morning, no matter how much sleep they get. I'm sure the mornings then are not very unpleasant for anyone in the house. Again, I would suggest some sort of incentive, like if you go to bed at a certain time and you're up by a certain time, on this day, you can have extra, Snapchat time, Instagram time, play on your Xbox, whatever it is, to tie in something that they want with the sleep. And to speak to your pediatrician in all of these cases about kids who don't sleep, because sometimes they may want to alter if they're on meds, alter their medication or suggest melatonin or something else.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. There's some concern among some of the listeners who are very involved, sitting with their child, keeping them focused, getting them started, setting up their homework, that they're intervening too much. And they're saying, should we really be this engaged? Doesn't this become our homework as much as their homework if we're having to spend this much time serving as the police person, catalyst, whatever you might call it? How does a parent know what's too much intervention versus not enough? I think that's a tremendous issue for many of our listeners.
That's a great question, and also a tremendous issue for many of the parents I speak with and see in my practice. I think that question has there are two levels. First of all, I think the first level is about age. So, if you think about a 13 to maybe a 16-year-old, a 7th grader, to perhaps a young 10th grader, their frontal lobes can be up to 3 years behind in maturity. So that's, instead of being 13 to 16, they might actually be more like 10 and 13, in which case it wouldn't be unusual to sit down with a 10-year-old and help them get started, or be present while homework is happening. I think doing homework for kids in high school or middle school is a huge mistake. And I think correcting their homework can also be really thorny. If your kid asks you to correct it and you don't have a fight about it, great. But most kids fight with their parents. Let their teachers correct their homework, because then their teachers can actually see how they're really doing. For kids who are over 16 or 16 or older, I think actually keeping them focused on their homework is less ideal. Having them organize their homework, prioritize their homework, and stick to study blocks of time is more appropriate. So again, you may not want to sit at the table every night, but I'm sure there's work that you could do while your child is also working. And then you'll have a better sense of what's happening without having your fingers in what they're doing.
Okay, yeah. That balance is really so tough, right?
It's really hard.
Here's an interesting, very specific problem, which is, boy, have I seen this one before. My 16-year-old daughter has a very difficult time turning in homework. She gets really angry that we're on her case all the time about homework, and it makes evenings very difficult. How do I help her learn strategies to remember to turn in homework without feeling like I'm nagging her all the time? This concern about turning into a nag is, repeated by many of our listeners.
I know.
They find themselves nagging. It just makes for more hostility, and then what happens next, kind of.
Exactly. So let's look at how to turn homework in and then the nagging question. So how to turn homework in. Again, if you have a 16-year-old and they're actually more like a 13-year-old in terms of the turning the homework in executive functioning skill, then it's not unreasonable to ask the teacher for some prompting in that department. And particularly if they have a 504, that should be part of the 504 or an IEP. The other thing that I'm really encouraging kids to do now when they finish the homework is to take a picture of the homework and email it to their teacher so that their teacher sees that the homework is completed. And if they forget to turn it in, the teacher still has the homework.
Okay.
So the nagging question. So there's a difference between cueing and gentle reminding and nagging. And to me, nagging is like you say the same thing over and over. You're like the voice of the teacher in Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. And the kids, your kids are interpreting the same thing that Charlie Brown and his friends did. They don't hear anything. So the thing is to come up with a list and an agreement and refer them back to the list. You're cueing their sense of order. They get to choose how they go through the list, and you're not reminding them about the list. You're cueing them for the list. And sometimes maybe what you need is a Post-it in the morning that just says homework that you put right on their coat or right on their forehead with a smile. But when you're nagging, it's because they're not hearing what you're saying. The other thing to do when you have a direction that you're giving a child is to have them look you in the eye. I call this the rule of 3. They look you in the eye. You say what you want to say. They repeat back to you what they heard. Maybe you give them a little high five or a way to go, and you've now had a verbal, visual exchange of what needs to happen. Then you know that you've been heard. A lot of times parents are saying things like into the atmosphere and their kids are not listening. When you are looking at them directly and they're repeating back to you what they've heard, you know that it's gotten in there.
Okay. Here's just a question that's just everywhere here. Screen time, screen time, screen time. Some of the comments are things like, my child demands to be on their screen while working on their homework and says she won't work on her homework if the screens aren't there. My child repeatedly lies to us, saying that he's not on the screen, it's not in his room, he's finished his homework when he hasn't in order to get screen time. Just tremendous amount of my kid is addicted to her iPhone. Just tremendous number of comments about kids who are really, really, really difficult to move off the screen, or the only breaks my child will take or involve screen time and she won't do anything else. So it's just this screen time obsession problem, which we all know. Yeah.
So those are, that's a whole that's a whole webinar in and of itself. Invite me back. I can do that.
Okay.
What I want to say is that the child who won't do her homework unless she has her computer on, fine. Have her not do her homework. And have her go in without her homework. I mean, that is the natural consequence. The natural consequence is she'll go in without her homework. She won't like that. And then she'll do her homework. Sometimes we have to kind of figure out when we can call the bluff. And a piece of homework is a good time to do that because not a lot's resting on it. Not turning in your college essay, not such a great time to call the bluff, right? But turning in a piece of homework is a good time. Let her not do her homework and see what happens. The second one was the person who lies.
Kid who lies, lies about it. Right. I mean, it says is agreeable to their face, but then comes up with all sorts of shenanigans in order to get on the screen.
So again, my personal bias is that screen time is a privilege. And if you're lying to me, you are taking money out of our trust bank account. And so in order to put money back in that account, money that lets you do things that you want to do that I trust that you're actually doing, you have to prove to me that you're trustworthy. And the way you're going to do that is by bringing your computer out here and doing your homework out here and then showing it to me that it's finished. That's how I'm going to know that it's done. And then you can have your screen time. So, in some ways you have to be willing to,
Be the bad guy.
be the bad guy because,
Right.
Kids, part of the struggle for power is that teens are pushing up to see if you're going to push back.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of want you to.
Right.
They don't want you to let them run ragged, even though that's what they say. But in general, they want to have some kind of containment. That's
Right.
how they know where their limits are, because they actually don't have them.
Right. Okay, so I very much regret to say that we are out of time because we have another 50 really wonderful questions. So Sharon, we may have to take you up on that offer to come back again. And everyone who listened in today, thank you so much for all of your fabulous questions, and know that you're not alone because you have 700 other people on this webinar who are posting similar questions to yours. Check back to attitudemag.com for Sharon's responses to specific questions. And we do have a webinar next week on screen time. Next Tuesday, 1 p.m., screen time for the ADHD brain with Wes Crenshaw, PhD, who does great work with teens and young adults. And then April 5th, Ann Dolan will be talking about high school prep, a transition from middle school to higher grades, what you can do to make that work better. So thanks, everyone.